Have you ever wondered why, even after 60, masturbation still feels good, yet something inside you questions whether it's helping or quietly holding you back? And even deeper than that, have you ever asked yourself why the size of your penis still creeps into your thoughts, shaping your confidence in ways you never admit out loud? Men tell me all the time, Dr. Collins, I still masturbate, but I feel insecure about my erection, about my penis, about whether I'm still enough. And the truth is, those questions don't disappear with age. They simply get heavier. What most older men don't realize is that these concerns are not about lust or vanity. They're about identity, about the instinctive need to feel capable, masculine, and sexually alive. When erections soften, when sensitivity changes, when sex becomes harder to enjoy, a man's relationship with his own body shifts. And suddenly, the same penis he lived with for decades becomes a source of pressure, comparison, even doubt. That's why you might find yourself thinking about size more now than you did at 25, wondering whether women care, whether you still measure up, whether your body is aging faster than your mind. But here's the truth that rarely gets said: masturbation after 50 is not the problem. The real issue is the meaning you attach to it. When your erection doesn't respond the way it used to, you assume weakness. When you compare yourself to other men, you assume inadequacy. When you think your penis should look or perform a certain way, you create tension that shuts down the very pleasure you're trying to reach. And this combination, age changes, performance pressure, silent insecurity, can affect blood flow, slow arousal, and make every touch feel like a test you're trying to pass. What I want you to understand is that none of this makes you broken. It makes you human. Your penis hasn't lost its value. Your sex drive hasn't disappeared. Your masculinity hasn't expired. What's really happening is that your brain, your hormones, and your circulation are asking for a new approach, one that respects the changes of age instead of fighting them like an enemy. And that's why this video matters. Because once you start seeing your erection, your sex habits, and your penis through a different lens, you stop feeling ashamed and start feeling in control again, something most men haven't felt for years. You deserve clarity, confidence, and honesty about your sexual health, and that begins right here. Right now. Before we move forward, tell me in the comments if you've ever questioned your erection strength, your penis size, or your confidence as you've gotten older. Your experience matters more than you think. And if this opening already speaks to you, make sure to like the video and check whether you're subscribed, because the next part will open your eyes to things most men never hear but absolutely need to know as they continue this journey. As you move deeper into your 60s, something subtle but powerful begins to shift in the way your body responds to sexual stimulation. Many men think the issue is sudden, like a switch flipping off one day, but the truth is far more gradual and far more biological. Your erection starts taking longer to build, the sensitivity in your penis doesn't fire with the same intensity, and the arousal that once surged effortlessly now feels quieter, slower, sometimes uncertain. But none of these changes mean that your sex drive is gone or that your penis is failing. They mean your internal systems are adapting. Biologically, one of the biggest shifts is circulation. The tiny arteries that supply your penis become less elastic over time, which means blood doesn't rush in as quickly or stay as firmly trapped. When you were younger, the slightest sexual thought could generate an erection because your vascular system responded instantly. After 50, the process becomes more delicate. Your penis still works, but it requires different conditions: calmness, warmth, slower buildup, lower stress. Many men interpret this as weakness, when in reality it's simply physiology evolving with age. Another major factor is nerve sensitivity. The nerve endings in the penis change with time, and the neural signals that once reacted like electricity begin to transmit more like a steady pulse. Touch that once triggered immediate pleasure may now need more warmth, more rhythm, or more time. This is not loss, it's adaptation. But if you treat your body like it's still 25, you will experience frustration instead of fulfillment. Hormones also play a role. Testosterone doesn't vanish after 50, but its pattern changes. Instead of spontaneous desire, you may feel more situational desire. Instead of constant readiness, you may need physical or emotional cues to activate arousal. This is natural, and it does not diminish your masculinity. In fact, studies show that older men often experience deeper emotional drive rather than pure physical impulse, reshaping the experience of sex and masturbation into something more intentional rather than automatic. Psychologically, this stage of life introduces another layer, the fear of decline. Many men begin monitoring their erections like indicators of health, comparing today's performance to memories from decades ago, creating silent pressure in moments that should feel private and relaxing. The mind becomes tense, and that tension directly blocks blood flow. The harder you try, the more your body resists. What you interpret as dysfunction is often a stress response, not a physical failure. The most important thing to understand is that these age-related changes are not signals of brokenness. They are signals to adjust your expectations, your technique, and your mindset. When you slow down, when you let arousal rise without forcing it, when you stop measuring yourself against past versions of you, your erection becomes steadier, your pleasure deepens, and your confidence returns. The body still knows how to experience pleasure, it just needs you to work with it, not against it. This stage of life isn't about losing your sexuality. It's about rediscovering it through a different rhythm, a different awareness, and a different understanding of what stimulation means for a mature male body. And once you accept that, everything begins to feel easier, more alive, and more under your control than you might expect. As men get older, something unexpected happens in the mind long before it happens in the body. The relationship you have with your penis, with your confidence, and with the idea of sexual worth becomes more sensitive, more vulnerable, and more easily shaped by comparison. Even if you thought you were past worrying about size or performance, those doubts can creep back in when erections change, when masturbation feels different, or when you fear you no longer meet some invisible standard defined by younger men, media exaggerations, or old insecurities you never resolved. The older male mind becomes a battleground between what you know logically and what you feel emotionally. For decades, men have been conditioned to believe that penis size is a symbol of strength, masculinity, desirability, and success. Even though science, research, and women themselves overwhelmingly say otherwise, the myth survives in the male psyche. And after 50, when circulation slows or erections feel less predictable, many men begin assuming the worst. They reinterpret every sensation, every moment of slower arousal, every softer erection as proof that something is wrong with them physically or that size suddenly matters more than it ever did. But what actually damages confidence isn't the penis itself. It's the comparison mindset. Comparing yourself to younger versions of you, to other men, to fictional expectations, or to imagined opinions of women builds a silent tension that your body feels even when you're alone. That tension affects masturbation, sex, desire, and even your willingness to be fully present in intimate moments. You begin to anticipate disappointment, and anticipation alone can restrict blood flow, mute sensation, and make the experience feel like a performance rather than a release. The truth is, women don't evaluate men through the lens men imagine. For most women, confidence, presence, touch, emotional awareness, and connection influence attraction far more than length or girth ever could. In fact, studies repeatedly show that extreme size is uncomfortable, not desirable. What women value is engagement, communication, trust, and a sense that the man in front of them feels secure in his own skin. But many older men sabotage themselves by believing myths instead of understanding reality. When an older man internalizes the idea that he must measure up, he places himself in a mental trap that affects both physical response and emotional satisfaction. Masturbation becomes less about pleasure. and more about testing performance. Sex becomes less about connection and more about evaluation. And this self-judgment gradually chips away at the very confidence that drives healthy sexual function. The more you chase control, the less control you actually feel. What most men don't realize is that the body responds not only to physical stimulation but also to psychological climate. A confident mind enhances arousal, strengthens erections, improves stamina, and heightens pleasure. A doubtful mind suppresses all of these. So the question isn't whether your penis is big enough. It's whether your mindset is supporting or sabotaging your sexual experience. Rebuilding this confidence doesn't require changing your size. It requires changing the lens through which you see yourself. When you stop treating your penis like an object to be evaluated and instead treat it as a part of your identity that deserves respect, understanding, and patience, your entire relationship with pleasure shifts. You begin to feel grounded instead of judged, connected instead of compared, and free instead of pressured. One of the biggest challenges older men face is separating truth from myth, especially when it comes to masturbation, penis size, and what women actually care about. These myths are not harmless, they shape behavior, distort self-perception, and create silent expectations that no real human body can meet. And because many of these ideas were absorbed in adolescence, long before you had any real understanding of your own sexuality, they tend to resurface later in life when physical changes trigger old insecurities. The result is a loop where myths feed anxiety, and anxiety disrupts sexual function. A common myth is that masturbation becomes harmful as men get older, that it weakens erections, drains energy, or somehow diminishes masculinity. In reality, the act itself is neutral. What changes its impact is the intention and the emotional weight behind it. When masturbation becomes tied to fear, measurement, or performance testing, it creates pressure that restricts arousal. But when it remains a natural expression of sexual energy, it supports circulation, maintains pelvic floor strength, and keeps sexual pathways active. The myth is not that the body is weakening, the myth is that pleasure becomes dangerous with age. Another myth is the exaggerated belief that women prioritize penis size above all else. This one is particularly destructive because it convinces men that something they cannot change determines their worth. And yet, every major study, and countless private interviews with women, reveal the opposite. Comfort, connection, trust, and confidence matter far more. What most women dislike are extremes, unpredictability, or partners who are so insecure that they cannot relax into intimacy. Size becomes a problem only when a man makes it his entire identity, allowing insecurity to overshadow presence. Men also carry myths about how erections should behave. Many believe that they should still achieve instant, firm arousal like they did at 20 or 30. So when arousal slows or requires more stimulation, they interpret it as loss rather than change. But a mature sexual response is not inferior, it is simply different. The body requires warmth, rhythm, relaxation, and emotional readiness. The myth that erections should be automatic leads to frustration, tension, and doubt, when in reality, the body is asking for a more mindful approach. There is also the myth that if something feels different or requires more time, it must be a sign of decline. But aging does not mean malfunction. It means your nervous system, hormones, and circulatory patterns have shifted. This change can actually create deeper satisfaction if you allow yourself to explore instead of rushing. When men cling to the myth that speed and immediacy equal health, they sabotage the richer, slower experiences their bodies are ready to offer. These myths have one thing in common: they disconnect men from their own bodies. They make sexuality feel like a test rather than an experience. They create fear where there should be curiosity, pressure where there should be presence. And when you believe these myths, you begin to fight your body instead of working with it. That internal conflict affects arousal, pleasure, and even your sense of identity. To move forward, you need to begin noticing these myths and questioning where they came from, because none of them were born from your body's wisdom. They came from culture, insecurity, outdated ideas, and misinformation. And the moment you release them, your body gains the freedom to respond the way it's meant to, with clarity, sensitivity, and connection. As men move through their 50s, 60s, and 70s, something powerful begins happening inside the body long before it's ever noticed in the bedroom. The systems that support erections, sexual desire, and overall vitality start shifting. Quietly. Circulation slows, hormone rhythms change, and daily habits that once had no impact suddenly matter more than ever. Yet most men continue living as if their bodies operate the same way they did at 30, unaware that their routine choices are directly influencing erection strength, sensitivity, and confidence. One of the most important factors is blood flow. Erections depend on healthy vascular response, and as the arteries age, they lose elasticity. The endothelium, the delicate lining inside your blood vessels, becomes less responsive. This doesn't mean your penis is failing, it means your circulatory system needs more support. The foods you eat, the hydration you maintain, the sleep you get, and even the stress you carry all influence whether blood can enter and stay inside penile tissue long enough to create firmness. Many older men think their penis is the problem, when really it's their circulation quietly signaling for change. Hormones play an equally significant role. Testosterone does not simply shut off with age, it shifts. Instead of large, predictable peaks, levels fluctuate, responding heavily to lifestyle. Poor sleep suppresses production. High stress elevates cortisol, which competes with testosterone. Inactivity lowers metabolic demand, reducing hormonal output. And when testosterone dips even slightly, libido becomes more situational. Desire appears in waves rather than surges. What many men interpret as loss of masculinity is actually a natural hormonal rhythm that can be strengthened with the right habits. Daily movement also matters far more than most realize. Sedentary habits reduce pelvic circulation, weaken the pelvic floor, and limit oxygen flow to tissues that rely on consistent blood supply. Just small amounts of movement, walking after meals, stretching before bed, engaging the core and hips, can dramatically improve the body's ability to deliver blood where it's needed. Yet many men overlook this, assuming that erectoral issues begin at the penis itself, when in reality, the foundation lies in the muscles, vessels, and pathways supporting it. Sleep is another overlooked pillar. Nighttime is when the body performs its repair work, testosterone rises, nitric oxide production stabilizes, and the nervous system resets. When sleep is shallow or inconsistent, these processes weaken. The result is less morning firmness, slower arousal, and reduced stamina. It's not age that causes this, it's the accumulation of nights without proper recovery. Stress also infiltrates sexual performance in ways men rarely acknowledge. Chronic mental tension constricts blood vessels, suppresses hormones, and overstimulates the sympathetic nervous system, the same system that shuts down erections during conflict or anxiety. Older men often carry decades of pressure, responsibility, and worry, and that weight settles into the body in ways that directly influence sexual response. Masturbation, sex, arousal, all become harder to access when the nervous system is constantly in alert mode. This is why understanding these daily factors is essential for any man who wants strong erections and sexual confidence later in life. Your penis is not separate from the rest of your body. It reflects your circulation, your hormones, your sleep quality, your stress levels, and your emotional environment. When you nourish those systems, you support your sexual function at its very core. And the encouraging truth is that the body remains incredibly responsive at any age. Whether you're 55, 65, or well into your 70s, improving these habits can reignite sensitivity, enhance arousal, and restore the confidence you thought was fading. The foundation of sexual health has never been size or age, it has always been circulation, balance, and understanding how your body truly works. The emotional and psychological side of male sexuality becomes even more influential with age, often more than men realize. While physical changes shape the way erections respond, it is the internal dialogue, the silent thoughts, the fears, the expectations, that often carries the greatest weight. Many older men describe a subtle but persistent tension that builds long before any physical stimulation begins. It might appear as worry about erection strength, concern about penis size, or fear of not performing the way they once did. And that tension directly influences the body's ability to experience arousal. For decades, masculinity has been tied to performance. Men are taught that a strong erection equals virility, that stamina equals competence, and that their worth is connected to how well they perform sexually. With age, when erections become slower or require more stimulation, many feel as if something essential is slipping away. But what truly undermines confidence is the belief that these changes mean failure. When you approach sex or masturbation with the mindset that you must prove something, to yourself or to a partner, you create a pressure that the nervous system interprets as stress. Stress is the enemy of arousal. The sympathetic nervous system, designed to react to danger, restricts blood flow and suppresses sexual response. Even mild anxiety activates it. So when an older man worries about his erection, he unknowingly triggers the very mechanism that makes the erection harder to achieve. Masturbation becomes a performance test rather than an experience. Sex becomes a moment of evaluation instead of connection. This internal conflict, desire mixed with fear, creates a cycle that feeds itself every time. Another layer is the fear of disappointment. Many men worry that their partner will judge them if their erection isn't as firm or as consistent as before. Others fear losing intimacy altogether. These fears, though rarely spoken aloud, shape the emotional landscape of sexual experience. They alter breathing, increase tension in the pelvic muscles, and make the body feel guarded instead of open. Even when alone, these thoughts follow men into their private moments, influencing sensitivity, stamina, and the ability to fully enjoy pleasure. There's also a deeper emotional factor. Aging forces men to confront vulnerability. The penis becomes a symbol of identity, and when it behaves differently, it can make you feel exposed in ways that reach far beyond sex. This vulnerability can create frustration, sadness, or even shame, especially for men who were once confident and effortless in their sexual expression. But vulnerability does not diminish masculinity, it reveals the complexity of male sexuality and the need for understanding instead of judgment. What many men overlook is that their emotional state is not separate from their physical experience. The mind shapes the body's ability to feel pleasure. When the mind is calm, the nervous system relaxes, blood flows naturally, and the penis becomes more responsive. When the mind is tense or fearful, the body compensates by restricting sensation and limiting arousal. Recognizing this connection is not a weakness, it is a pathway to reclaiming control. The key is learning to observe the emotional patterns that influence your sexual response. When you understand how expectation, comparison, and performance pressure interfere with the natural process of arousal, you can begin to release them. This gives your body space to rediscover pleasure without the weight of judgment. And as the emotional load lightens, the physical response often becomes stronger, more consistent, and more satisfying. As you begin to understand how age, mindset, and daily habits shape your sexual experience, something even more meaningful emerges: clarity about what truly matters to women and how much control you actually have over your own confidence. Many older men assume that the changes they feel in their erection, their stamina, or even their penis size somehow diminish their value. But what countless women describe, again and again, is that the qualities that make a man desirable later in life are not the ones he worries about. They notice presence, patience, emotional awareness, steadiness, and the kind of confidence that comes from a man who understands his own body instead of trying to fight it. This shift in perspective can be liberating. When you stop focusing on what you think women might judge and start paying attention to what they genuinely appreciate, the pressure dissolves. Women respond deeply to connection, to touch that is intentional, to a man who listens and engages. They are far more interested in how they feel with you than in how you believe you should perform. And when that mental weight lifts, your body responds differently. Erections become steadier, arousal becomes more natural, and sexuality begins to feel less like a test and more like a space where you can finally breathe. Another powerful truth is that confidence does not depend on youth, it depends on understanding. When you learn how your circulation works, how your hormones shift, how your emotions influence arousal, and how women actually think, you gain a sense of control that many younger men never develop. You stop fearing changes and start working with them. You discover that pleasure at 60 can be deeper than pleasure at 20 because it is no longer driven by impulse but by awareness. And that awareness transforms intimacy into something richer, more grounded, and more real. Men who embrace this perspective often find a renewed sense of vitality. They walk differently. They carry themselves with more ease. They stop overthinking and start enjoying. And this shift affects not only masturbation or sex, it affects their relationships, their self-esteem, their energy, and even the way they see themselves in the mirror. Sexuality becomes a source of strength again, not a source of doubt. You are not defined by age. You are not defined by the firmness of your erection or the size of your penis. You are defined by how you choose to understand your body, your mindset, and your connection with the people you share intimacy with. When you allow yourself to grow into this new phase rather than resist it, you unlock a version of yourself that feels more confident, more capable, and more alive than you ever expected. And if you've come with me all the way to this point, then you already know how valuable this journey is. If this conversation spoke to something inside you, consider subscribing so you can keep receiving content that genuinely improves your sexual health and confidence. Leave a comment with the phrase "This message was for me" so I know you're part of this transformation. And give the video a like if it helped you understand your body in a new way. There's a related video right here that continues this path with insights that build directly on what you've learned today, so click and keep going at your own pace.